This story began in 2070, in August, 8 years after the end of the world. On the outskirts of Yuezhou, in a wild wasteland, with temperatures at 67 degrees, a group of survivors struggled to survive. They were attacked by a giant fire wolf, and one of the survivors desperately tried to shoot it. Meanwhile, the other survivors called on Captain Michael to finish off the creature, as they believed that only he could save them. However, the wolf rushed forward, its mouth directed at the captain, who had run out of ammunition. At that moment, two girls, Ella and Olivia, appeared trying to help, but one of them was immediately struck down by the monstrous creature. The blow landed on the wolf's head, but instead of weakening it, the attack only increased his rage. The enraged beast turned its wrath on the defenseless women, and Ella, paralyzed with horror, watched as sharp fangs reached out to her. At the last moment, Michael rushed in front of her, shooting. He shouted at the wolf to get away. He then plunged the knife deep into the beast's chest, but at that moment the monster's powerful jaws grabbed him by the shoulder. The blow sent the captain flying back, but the creature itself was forced to recoil as well. Two girls rushed to him. Olivia immediately began to bandage his bleeding wound. Ella cried in despair, begging her brother Michael not to die. Suddenly, another survivor grabbed Olivia's hand as she tended to the wound. Liam, the second in command, announced that he would take the captain's supplies, as he believed Michael was already doomed. The girl, filled with indignation, objected that abandoning the one who had saved them countless times was unthinkable. But the other man, Chris, just chuckled, saying no one ever asked Michael to play a hero. Then he grabbed her face and reminded her that 90% of humanity had already died. Chris added that Michael had become nothing but dead weight, and that saving them had previously been the only worthwhile thing he had ever done in his life. They then abandoned the wounded captain, leaving him to die alone. Olivia and Ella tried to resist, wanting to stay and help him. However, the rest of the group forcibly pulled them away. With a cruel grin, Liam said that once they got to camp, they might even be rewarded with someone important. Suddenly, Olivia broke free, delivered a sharp kick to the blond man's face and called him a coward. Meanwhile, Ella bit her captor on the hand in an attempt to escape. An enraged Chris immediately threw Olivia to the ground and declared that with the captain gone, she now belonged to him. She looked at him with pure hatred as his arms tightened around her neck. But the man leaned closer, sticking his tongue out at Olivia. He intended to do something terrible to her. Suddenly, a powerful fist struck the attacker, throwing him back. A confused Chris hit the ground hard, unable to comprehend what had happened. It turned out that the captain had risen to his feet, but his body was shaking and his shoulder was still bleeding from the wolf's bite. The faces of his traitorous comrades reflected shock. The man they had just thought dead was alive. Olivia and Ella shouted his name joyfully, while the rest trembled in terror. Michael then pointed the gun at the traitors, ordering them to immediately release the girls. Liam tried to defuse the situation, but the captain fired a warning shot at his feet, cutting off any further excuses. Then an enraged Chris grabbed a massive rock and rushed to attack Michael. But before he could strike, the captain fired, knocking him down with incredible accuracy. Then, with equal speed, he shot Liam in the leg, causing him to let out a cry of agony. Then the two traitors, overcome with fear, realized that they should not have anything to do with this guy. Instead, they fled into the wasteland, screaming that the captain would not survive alone. Michael, however, did not pursue them. His strength was exhausted, and he collapsed. Olivia immediately caught him, saying worriedly that she had known all along that he would never die so easily. Then something strange happened. A glowing mark appeared on his chest, and Michael admitted that there was something wrong with him. He explained that at the moment of his death, an ability awakened within him that revived him in defiance of the laws of nature. The girls were confused, although Olivia quickly realized that Michael had awakened a unique power. Several more screens appeared in front of him, informing him that he had earned 1 experience point and could level up. Michael wondered out loud what this strange ability was, and what purpose these glasses could serve. But their conversation was interrupted. The firewolf returned, seeking to complete the hunt he had begun. Panic gripped the group, but Michael rose to his feet, assuring them that they had no reason to fear, for he now had the ability. He thought that if he couldn't defeat even this beast, he wouldn't be able to protect anyone from the much more powerful drought demons. Meanwhile, the wolf found one of the fleeing people and devoured him without hesitation. Liam whispered that their plan was to use Chris's corpse to distract the creature and buy time. However, the firewolf now ignored them, focusing entirely on Michael and the two girls. With terrifying speed, he jumped on them. The girls shouted at the captain to be careful, but Michael calmly stated that what was rushing towards him was an experience. He opened fire, and with each shot he noticed his pistol gaining power. To his amazement, he realized that every enemy he defeated gave the weapon experience. Soon the gun reached its maximum potential, glowing with untapped power. Excited, Michael tried to improve it even more. However, the system warned that his own level was still too low. The girls exchanged worried glances, fearing that this ordeal had driven him completely mad. But Michael focused his energy on the gun, and at that moment, a bright beam burst from its barrel, hitting straight into the wolf's open mouth. With a confident smile, he said that he was now much stronger than before. The remaining members of the squad, watching from afar, were stunned to see the captain kill the monster. They realized they couldn't let a man like Michael live. Finally, after a grueling struggle, Michael and the girls reached the survivors' camp in Wenjiang. Relief washed over the hero when he realized that they had finally reached a safe place. The girls, exhausted by the 2-day journey, shared his joy. Then Michael, although tired, decided that now that they had found shelter, they needed to gain more experience. Ella, still shaken by everything they had been through, anxiously asked if they could really stay at the camp. The captain reassured her, explaining that the Fang organization had an obligation to accept the survivors, and that they would not be driven out so easily. Soon after, other survivors approached, admiring the wolf meat Michael's group had brought back. Many of them offered items in exchange for even a small portion of food, water, shoes, and other essentials. In the midst of this crowd, Olivia suddenly recognized one of the group members who had once abandoned them. The traitor tried to justify himself by saying that he also wanted to ask the captain for some meat. Then she reminded him that he had no right to call Michael their captain after the betrayal. At that moment, the man fell to the ground and pretended to beg Michael for forgiveness. The man began to explain that he himself had been deceived, claiming that this animal had forced them all to abandon the captain. He said that Liam had found the core of a high-class monster and wanted to keep it all for himself. Desperate to avoid starving to death, the traitor begged pitifully for a piece of meat. Michael agreed to give it to him, although Olivia looked at it with disapproval. The traitor smiled with relief, assuming that the captain held no grudge. But instead, Michael grabbed his face and coldly declared that before a man could eat, he must first suffer. The shocked man stuttered, asking if Michael was making fun of him. But the captain declared that he really held a grudge, and would not simply share the food he had worked so hard to obtain with anyone. He then threw the meat into the crowd, and the desperate survivors rushed forward to tear out pieces for themselves. Hidden away, Liam watched the scene with anger, furious at how lucky this Michael was. Meanwhile, Olivia and Ella were restoring order, urging people to calm down and take only one piece at a time. Later, to their disappointment, they were given very little supplies, and Liam noted with a smile that the supplies were distributed to the weakest first. Olivia's anger boiled over as she accused him of using the rules for personal revenge after what had happened earlier. However, Liam was only feigning innocence, insisting that he only cared about them because Michael was hurt. Then he contemptuously kicked them out of the line and told them to stop acting like victims. The girl's face turned red with rage, and she seemed ready to pounce on him for his insolence. But Michael held her back, urging her to forget about it, reminding her that Ella was waiting for them. As they left, others in the camp mocked them, one man even scoffing at the idea of the captain giving them the girls. It was then that Michael realized that the hostility was spreading, and that many in the camp were beginning to treat them differently. So he decided to split their responsibilities. He would go hunting while the girls would take care of things inside the camp. Meanwhile, from afar, one of the traitors watched their departure. Apparently, he was preparing some kind of plan. At camp, Ella was cooking a piece of meat over a fire, carefully fanning it as she cooked. Suddenly, a group of men appeared in her tent, demanding that she share her food with them. However, she refused, explaining that Michael had risked his life to get it. Then the villains roughly threw her to the ground and tried to steal the meat by force. Other survivors watched, but no one dared to intervene for fear of getting into trouble. The group's leader grabbed Ella, mockingly telling her to call for help and see if her brother would come. At that moment, a loud shot rang out, hitting the villain's hand right before he could touch Ella. At that very moment, Michael entered the tent, anger radiating from him as he saw what was happening. The attacker panicked, begging the captain not to act rashly, but Michael, without thinking, fired his pistol. The first shots shattered the man's legs, causing him to fall to his knees. Then the captain calmly declared that the attacker had brought this punishment upon himself. After this, the man fired the last shot, hitting the villain right in the head. When Michael fired, the system responded immediately, informing him that his gun had gained experience and become a reward weapon. The remaining men were horrified, screaming that Michael had just committed a serious crime. Olivia ran into the tent, anxiously asking if everything was safe. Upon seeing the corpse, she realized that the dead man was one of Liam's henchmen, which only confirmed her suspicions. Then Ella burst into tears, blaming herself for Michael's decisive action. But her friend consoled her, insisting that it was not her fault, and that the attacker got the fate he deserved. She then revealed that she had discovered how the scoundrel had been spreading rumors about Michael, turning the camp against him. Now the people in the camp not only didn't want to work with Michael, but they also wanted to kick him out of there. Shocked, the captain learned that people were now talking about expelling him from the camp. With a cold, challenging smile, he said he would like to see who dared to make such an attempt. At that very moment, a squad of soldiers appeared in front of their tent, demanding Michael. The man calmly walked outside, introducing himself briefly. The leader, who called himself Kai, announced that Michael had violated the camp rules. The soldiers moved forward to detain him. However, Michael easily pushed them back, making it clear that he would not give up so easily. Then the girls rushed to him, trying to protect and justify their friend. Suddenly, Liam, standing behind him, smiled evilly, noting that resistance was useless because the bullets were merciless. Michael screamed that he had only acted in self-defense because the attacker had robbed him and harmed his friend. However, Kai demanded proof, and Liam smirked, accusing Michael of slander. At that same moment, one of his henchmen came up with a story that Michael's group fired first. Ella then showed the bruises on her arm as evidence of the attack. However, the men twisted the story, insisting that she had intentionally injured herself to frame them. Then Michael, enraged, reminded Kai that he had seen for himself how Liam had always treated him. However, Kai dismissed his words and ordered the soldiers to seize the captain. But suddenly Michael announced that he had one more piece of evidence. His words shocked everyone, and Liam became nervous, suspecting that it was a bluff. Michael explained that there was a special mark on their meat and that the soldiers could verify this by searching Liam's tent. Kai hesitated, unsure what to do, but Michael insisted that he himself had nothing to hide. Then, to distract attention, Michael moved forward with his gun drawn, accusing Liam of being afraid of the investigation. At that moment, Liam and his henchmen trembled, alarmed by the hero's words. Eventually, one of the soldiers searched the prosecutor's tent and soon returned with the stolen meat in his hands. Michael calmly explained that his comrade always put secret marks on their provisions so that the food could be easily found. When the soldiers examined the meat, they found a small bird symbol. Kai picked it up and asked what such a sign meant. Olivia blushed slightly and admitted that it was the swallow symbol, a sign she had chosen herself. At this point, Liam tried to defend himself, insisting that the marks were put there later to frame him. The girl then addressed him directly, asking why, if it was true, the food had her personal mark on it. The man stumbled, speechless, realizing he had been caught in a lie from which there was no escape. Enraged by this deception, Kai activated his ability and delivered a powerful blow to the beast's stomach. He warned the man never to waste his time again. With a final blow, Kai sent him flying and ended the chaos by ordering his men to retreat. Liam finally shouted threats at Michael, vowing revenge. However, the hero met him firmly, unperturbed by his words and ready for anything that might happen. After the crowd dispersed, Michael's group returned to their tent. Olivia noted that although the immediate danger had passed, Liam could still cause them trouble in the future. Michael agreed, adding that they would need to adapt to the circumstances and protect themselves carefully. Then, with studied patience, he began to fashion weapons from the bones they had collected, explaining that these would serve as a means of self-defense for her. Olivia accepted his gift, deeply touched by the captain's concern for her safety. Using his ability, Michael formed a small hand crossbow. The system congratulated him, informing him that it earned him 1 experience point. Ella, her eyes wide, admired the weapon and thought to herself that the captain was amazingly cool. Wanting to test his work, Michael shot an arrow, although the result was disappointing. The girls exchanged glances, trying to hide their disappointment. They still treasured the gift, but felt that the weapon was weaker than they had hoped. Michael then called upon his abilities once more, pouring energy into the crossbow. With a triumphant smile, the captain demonstrated a new version, much more powerful. He handed the crossbow to Olivia, noting that it should now be much more effective. She immediately tested the weapon, and with one powerful shot the arrow cut through the air and hit the ground with such force that it created a small crater. The girl froze in delight, barely able to believe what she had witnessed. She then thanked Michael for the extraordinary weapon, and Ella insisted that she too should have the same weapon. Michael then assured them both that in due time everyone would be armed, since he now had a reliable way to gain experience. Later, the boys returned to the post in search of new work, where Liam was waiting for them with a mocking smile, asking what business they had come for. Michael replied that they had completed their last mission and wanted to get the next one. Liam, however, had other intentions. He tasked them with a dangerous mission in an area infested with giant wolves, and Olivia was furious at the obvious malice. Desperate, she tried to recruit other survivors, saying that Michael had a special ability that could turn the tide. Yet no one dared to join them, believing that they would only be used as bait. One man chuckled openly, declaring that no one would risk their life next to a murderous captain. The girls immediately rushed to defend him, explaining that he had been set up, but their words fell on deaf ears. And Liam only laughed at their humiliation, shouting that not a single soul wanted to join their ranks. And then Michael's patience snapped. He slammed his fist on the table, pressing Liam's face into it. He hit him with such force that the scoundrel simply fell to the ground. By firing his gun right in the man's face, he reminded everyone that in this world, strength is all that matters. With determination, he showed that his weapon contained an infinite supply of ammunition, with a power that no other could match. He then stated that anyone who wished to join his group should meet him at the well. The survivors looked at each other uncertainly, but many began to consider this proposal. Liam, meanwhile, was humiliated once again and could not understand why fortune continued to favor his opponent. Later, the sun scorched the earth and the survivors could hardly work, and Olivia complained bitterly about the heat. However, Ella said that they needed to complete the task honestly, so that the others would see their diligence and agree to go with them. Suddenly Ella flinched, her eyes glowing a bright green. She warned Michael that something was wrong. However, the hero and Olivia did not see anything unusual. But suddenly the ground shook beneath their feet, and soon a massive stone golem appeared in front of them, rushing towards them. Michael, shocked, wondered how this could be possible, since stone monsters usually did not move. The golem's first blow shook the ground where they had stood just moments before, but the boys were able to jump back. Michael knew they couldn't just dodge, they had to confront this monster. The hero, without hesitation, drew his weapon and fired several shots at the creature. However, the bullets ricocheted harmlessly off his stone skin, which enraged him even more. Michael quickly realized that conventional ammunition was useless against this enemy. But the monster was not going to give up. He raised his huge stone hand to strike. Then the hero urgently ordered the girls to find shelter while he distracted the golem's attention. After shooting at the golem, he defiantly shouted at the monster to focus on him. Meanwhile, Michael himself ran away in the opposite direction from the girls. The golem immediately rose up, tearing chunks of stone from its own body and launching them as deadly projectiles. Michael dodged, deftly maneuvering between the flying rocks, although he realized that he would not be able to defeat the creature immediately. But the battle gave him experience. Then suddenly one of the stone projectiles hit him in the leg, knocking him down. Michael cursed that he couldn't improve his pistol at such a moment. Then Olivia, seeing the despair in her friend's eyes, noticed that Ella was also hesitating. Then, with determination, she declared that she would not abandon the captain. Grabbing the crossbow he gave her, she prepared to test its true strength in combat. She fired a powerful arrow that flew towards the giant. It hit accurately, but was only able to leave a scratch on his body. Frustration and despair washed over Olivia, as the weapon that seemed so powerful still couldn't harm him. The golem unleashed a crushing barrage, hurling rocks in all directions. Both girls were stunned and fell to the ground, unable to defend themselves from the furious onslaught. And Michael, in despair, continued shooting to gain experience, but at the most inopportune moment his pistol jammed. Panic washed over him as the monstrous figure approached, the golem's heavy footsteps shaking the ground. He fiddled frantically with the weapon, trying to fix it before the creature got to him. Finally, he accumulated enough experience to level up. The system confirmed his progress, and the hero realized that he could improve his weapon. Meanwhile, the golem's stone hands grabbed the two girls, trapping them. But their sacrifice bought Michael precious time. As soon as his weapon was ready, he immediately fired at the golem's stone hands. He completed the upgrade, and when he looked down, he saw that his gun had been transformed, becoming more powerful and much more deadly. Then he aimed at the giant's vulnerable joints and fired. Each shot shattered the stone, causing the monster to stagger as its body began to fall apart. Yet Michael knew that destruction alone would not be enough, and before their eyes the monster began to rebuild. The pistol shots were only a temporary solution. Anxiety spread throughout the group as the girls watched helplessly from the sidelines. At that moment, Ella's eyes lit up again. She shouted to Michael that the true weak point was in the creature's core. Only by destroying it could they ensure victory over this stone monster. Trusting her vision, the hero focused his energy and aimed at the faint glow pulsating in the monster's chest. After the shot, there was a deafening explosion. The bullet pierced the core of the monster, blowing it to pieces. The golem's stone body immediately collapsed, its energy drained, and its massive figure crumbled, the monster finally destroyed. Breathing heavily, Michael allowed himself to relax for a moment. Among the remains, he discovered the golem's core, a glowing sphere that radiated enormous power. After examining it, Olivia realized that it could be exchanged for a 3-month supply of provisions for 2 people. The girl asked how Ella knew where the core was, but the modest girl was only glad to finally help. Michael thanked Ella, but the girl was very embarrassed, and in every possible way denied her merits. Meanwhile, Liam watched from his hiding place, still very angry that Michael couldn't die. Unable to accept that Michael had survived, he raised his weapon and prepared to strike. and again a warning flashed in Ella's eyes. Sensing danger, she rushed forward, pushing Michael out of the way of the bullet. However, the bullet ended up hitting her directly, and Ella cried out in pain as blood sprayed from her hand. Michael fell to the ground, horrified to see that his girlfriend had been injured instead of him. Olivia rushed to her wounded friend, trying to help her, but Ella insisted that everything was fine, although her appearance said otherwise. Michael was overcome with rage and stood up, his face dark with fury, determined to avenge the betrayal. Michael fired with perfect accuracy and destroyed Liam's weapon in an instant. Shock showed on his enemy's face. He had not expected his hiding place to be discovered from such a distance. Michael's next shot hit the man in the leg, causing him to cry out in pain. The man then began to shout apologies, claiming that he only wanted to help against the monster. But Michael, filled with contempt, coldly demanded to know how this man could have known that they had fought there. Then he fired again, hitting Liam in the other knee and sending him crashing to the ground. In despair, Liam screamed that killing him would violate the laws of this broken world. Michael responded with silence and another merciless shot, this time into the man's arm, shattering it completely. The air filled with screams of agony as the man writhed on the ground. Michael stated that since Liam attacked first, he would not take his life, but he would make him suffer. Then Liam begged for mercy, but Michael ignored him. Suddenly, the villain pulled his sword from behind his back and thrust it sharply into Michael's side while he was distracted. But the hero responded with a brutal kick that sent the man flying far back. The blow pinned him right against a pile of rocks, which was in fact a nearly defeated stone golem. Liam's screams were cut off abruptly as the golem opened its mouth and devoured him. The girls turned away from the terrible sight. But despite their shock, they realized that their enemy was gone and they were finally safe. Soon night fell. Exhausted by the ordeal, the boys gathered around a small fire. They treated their wounds and decided to rest. While they were resting, Olivia turned to Ella, asking what kind of power she had awakened during the battle. The girl admitted that she wasn't sure. She felt a strange energy stir inside her as the battle raged. Together they tried to guess what it could be. Perhaps a heightened perception beyond that of ordinary people. Then both girls hugged Michael tenderly, grateful that they had such a strong protector. Olivia admired Ella's keen senses, claiming they were better than most people's, although deep down she passionately desired to awaken her abilities too. But Michael reassured her by pointing to the crossbow she carried and saying that it was powerful enough to kill even monsters. He added that he could improve it even more, and Olivia really liked that idea. Without wasting any time, the hero began to create new arrows, each of which gave him more experience. He explained that progress is achieved through such a creation, as leveling up allows it to enhance items. Olivia watched in amazement, intrigued by his unusual method of increasing his strength. Soon Michael had gained enough experience to rise another level, power flowing through his body and his strength renewed. When he asked for the crossbow back, Olivia gave it to him immediately. The weapon itself has gained experience in use, which has made the improvement more qualitative. Once completed, its range increased to 120 meters, and Michael immediately tested it. The arrow flew forward with tremendous force, shattering the boulder into pieces. And Michael declared that with such a weapon, they no longer needed to fear even the golem. Then Olivia hugged him tightly, promising never to disappoint him. He then smiled and gave Ella her own crossbow, saying that now she too would be able to defend herself. But suddenly Ella tensed up. Her eyes lit up again. She said sharply, "Someone is approaching." Suddenly the group noticed a man approaching from afar. But before the man could say anything, he was struck by an arrow. He fell lifelessly to the ground, finished off by the sudden and merciless attack. The girls recoiled in fear, only then realizing that this man had powers. Michael then remarked that if it weren't for Ella's intervention, they all could have been in serious trouble. Then he felt a change in the air that made him uneasy. A moment later, a patrol of soldiers arrived and quickly discovered the traitor's body. The patrol leader demanded to know who was responsible for the man's murder. Michael, without hesitation, stepped forward and took responsibility, explaining that he had acted in self-defense. One of the soldiers, however, accused him of striking first, but Ella intervened, insisting that he was not lying about what happened. The masked man, Commander Benjamin, bent down to examine the body and concluded that the weapon used was unusual. He then noticed that Michael's strength made him a valuable asset to the camp. Therefore, he decided that there was little point in punishing such a person because of one murder. Benjamin then ordered them to release the group and immediately stopped the investigation. After this, the patrol leader said that those who broke the rules deserved to die, and soon left with his men. Once everything was finished, Benjamin said that they should bury the body, thus closing the matter. But then, however, he lingered, watching the group with particular interest, and Michael noticed him and felt uneasy. He reminded the girls that they had survived thanks to Ella's gift. and added that they needed armor or an exoskeleton to face future threats. The girls agreed, realizing that they could not always rely on others for protection. Together they began to dig the grave. The task was grueling. The girls grumbled, their arms ached, and their clothes were soaked with sweat. Michael was also dissatisfied, admitting that digging a grave was exhausting beyond measure. He then looked at the fortress and was shocked at how quickly it was being built. Olivia noted that such rapid progress meant that there were Earth-based ability users in the military. Michael later reflected that the military clearly intended to stay there for a long time. The girls, however, were delighted with the idea of finding a truly safe place to live, something they had long dreamed of. Unlike the others, Ella ate only a little, admitting her concern that she wasn't helping the group enough. But Michael reassured her, saying that with time, they would no longer have problems with food. Olivia also added that the hero had never lied to them before, and urged her to trust his words. Feeling relieved, Ella smiled and began to eat her rightful piece of meat. Soon after, Michael told them that he needed to go to military camp, and the girls asked him what exactly he had in mind. The hero just silently looked at the towering fortress, still doubting that it was really a military camp. The next day, the boys were stunned to discover that the fortress had grown even taller, with another floor added overnight. At the entrance, armed guards blocked their path, demanding to know their intentions. The guards explained that they were creating a safe zone and invited them to join. However, Michael refused, not wanting to risk revealing the secret of his system. And he was also not convinced of the fortress's security. Instead, he presented the monster's core and announced that he would like to exchange it for something specific. The guards asked what he wanted in return. Michael then calmly stated that he needed a portable safe house, and Olivia and Ella were shocked by such a bold request. He explained that their defenses were too fragile and that such a shelter was necessary. However, the guards replied that one core would not be enough, but Michael offered it as a down payment. He was then escorted deeper into the fortress to make his special request. Inside, the boys were amazed by the sight of workers creating modern equipment with astonishing efficiency. Michael didn't expect the military to have technology at that level, and he wondered how many secrets they were hiding. Soon they appeared before the head of the development department. The man turned around, and to Michael's surprise, it turned out to be the same masked man, Benjamin, who had previously investigated them. However, Benjamin calmly greeted him and asked what he wanted. Michael replied that he needed a portable bunker. Benjamin then specified what kind of portable shelter he wanted. Michael didn't hesitate to describe a luxurious home that could be transformed into a portable box. The group couldn't help but laugh at the idea, finding it patently absurd and impossible. Benjamin then asked Michael how much he thought it would cost to build such a thing. Workers nearby laughed openly, saying that they were engineers, not miracle workers. The girls were embarrassed when the workers told them that the hero was just showing off. Olivia then responded irritably that they shouldn't speak like that, but Benjamin silenced them and ordered them to prepare for a demonstration. He activated a device that projected images of shelters made of different materials and sizes. Turning to Michael, he asked which one was right for him. The hero chose a simple structure for 5 people, with proper ventilation and camouflage elements. But Benjamin warned the cost would be high, estimating at least 100 cores. Leaning closer, he even whispered that joining the safe zone would be a cheaper and more sensible option. The girls were horrified by such a huge price, declaring that it was far beyond their means. Michael, however, ignored their protests and asked how long the construction would take. Benjamin replied that 10 cannonballs would be needed as a down payment by evening. Michael then asked if the cores could be exchanged for something equivalent. Benjamin agreed and offered 100 kilograms of monster meat as an alternative. The agreement was then put into writing, and Michael signed the contract. His lips curved into a confident smile, and he declared that they would soon experience the power of a true refuge. Without delay, the group set out into the dark forest and the wild mountains in search of the monster meat needed for payment. Michael asked Ella if she sensed any monsters nearby, but her ability only worked within a 100-meter range. She hung her head, apologizing for her uselessness. But the hero reassured her, saying that she was already doing her best. A moment later, her eyes suddenly flashed the now familiar green light. She strongly warned Michael to be careful of the roots. Reacting instantly, Michael raised his weapon and fired at the target she sensed. The hidden monster jumped out from behind the trees, but managed to avoid the shot. Its energy dissipated, and it tried to hide in another tree trunk. But Michael pursued him. He fired again, hitting a tree and finally revealing the lurking creature. The girls cried out in triumph, impressed by the skill of their hero. Olivia hurried to examine the monster, noting with surprise that it was nothing more than an ordinary tree. Then Ella focused and found its core. When they discovered it, Olivia was amazed by its size, wondering that such a small-looking creature could possess such power. Michael praised his companion, and she responded with determination, promising to try even harder to bring even more benefit to the group. Ella burst into tears of joy, relieved that she had finally been able to contribute to the group's work. And yet, her eyes lit up again, warning her of another danger. High above, a monstrous three-eyed bird appeared, its enormous wings cutting through the sky as it prepared to strike. Michael reacted instantly, raising his weapon and shooting at the beast. However, the creature was flying at an astonishing speed, making it difficult for it to strike. Suddenly, a familiar pain pierced Michael's body. His old wound reopened from the strain. Gritting his teeth, he pulled himself together, waiting for the right moment. As the bird approached to attack, he quickly fired 3 times at once. The bullets pierced her wings, throwing her off balance in the air and causing her to fall to the ground. Michael moved forward, a crackling electrical aura enveloping his body. With his final shot, he struck the bird dead, and the shot caused a fiery explosion that shook the earth. From a distance, the girls watched what was happening with alarm, while at the same time fearing for the hero. They whispered among themselves that his pistol must really be extraordinary if they had managed to bring down a beast of such size. The weapon, glowing with new energy, turned into the king of pistols, with a firing range of 150 meters, but suddenly the hero felt his power pass through him, although the recoil only increased the pain in his wound. Suddenly someone said that the bird had not died completely. It had managed to escape. Then a new group of survivors emerged from the forest, claiming to have spotted the bird first, and intending to take it for themselves. Ella immediately stood in front of her friends, ready to protect them. An angry Olivia demanded to know if these strangers had come to steal what was rightfully theirs. At their head stood a man named Bennett, his men following close behind him straight to the slain monster. One of them said that it had been too long since he had last tasted the meat of such a creature. Another warned that it would be wiser to exchange the carcass with the military. Then the third man stated that with their numbers they had nothing to fear. But Bennett silenced him, claiming the monster belonged to them, but warned his men not to provoke a fight. However, he admitted that they would never have been able to bring down the bird so quickly on their own. Michael, having weighed the situation, approached Bennett and offered cooperation. Bennett asked curiously what kind of help they needed. Michael explained that if Bennett's group helped move the huge bird, he would pay them 5 kilograms of meat. But Bennett objected, demanding 50, as he realized that the meat clearly contained a lot of energy. Eventually, Michael increased his offer to 12, and they finally made a deal. To reassure his partners, Michael declared that he would personally destroy any monsters that came their way. Once the terms were agreed upon, Bennett formally introduced himself and asked for the hero's name in response. Michael didn't object and told him his name. Bennett then divided his men into 3 groups. Each of these groups was tasked with helping transport the giant bird through the forest. As they set out, Michael quietly warned the girls to remain vigilant, admitting that he did not trust their temporary allies. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. Soon the boys were surrounded by people who were waiting for them in the forest. Michael immediately prepared for battle. Bennett was furious, realizing that no one had ever dared to steal his loot before. But before he could react, another group of survivors appeared, demanding that the bird be given to them. Bennett hesitated, assessing their strength, quickly realizing that there were at least 3 ability wielders among the new arrivals. But suddenly there was an explosion that shook the ground, and Bennett's eyes widened in shock. One of the thieves roared in rage, ready to attack. However, Michael intervened, warning grimly that if they advanced even 1 step further, his next shot would be their last. Bennett studied it with newfound respect, finally realizing that the gun was no ordinary weapon. He realized that the hero's abilities themselves must have enhanced his destructive power. The standoff became even more dangerous when the men from the newly arrived group struck the ground, causing it to shake violently. The girls staggered, horror in their eyes, and they wondered aloud what kind of frightening ability she possessed. Michael, who found himself in the very center of the chaos, ordered his comrades to cease fire to prevent the conflict from escalating. Nevertheless, the group moved forward. One of their men rushed forward, intending to snatch Michael's gun so that he would never have to suffer the humiliation of Bennett again. But before he reached the hero, the earth split into pieces. A monster burst out of the abyss and tore the man into pieces. Screams of horror rang out from both groups. The girls froze in horror, not knowing how to react. Then the rival leader chuckled, mocking Michael and demanding to know if he was afraid. In response, Michael raised his pistol and fired at the monster's core, the explosion shattering it into pieces. With a cold smile, the hero said that fear was inherent only to his enemies. Before the dust had settled, a woman from the enemy group rushed forward, grabbed the cannonball, and immediately ran away. Her leader howled in rage at the betrayal and immediately sent his men after her. Michael's men stood stunned, speechless at the sheer audacity of this girl. Once the threat was over, Michael and his allies dragged the bird's carcass back to the military base. The sight of the enormous body astonished the base workers, who exclaimed in disbelief at its enormous size. Then Michael, smiling, announced that this was the remainder of his payment for the promised portable home. The bird contained only 3 kilograms of meat and 1 kernel, but a large number of feathers and bones could be used as valuable materials. When everything was counted, the total came to 70 kilograms of meat and 47 monster cores, with the feathers and bones bringing the value to 87 cores. Olivia clapped her hands in delight, rejoicing at their unexpected success. At the same time, Bennett frowned with envy, bitterly regretting that the prize had gone to him. Michael then gave Bennett 10 kilograms of meat as part of their agreement. He asked for 15 kilograms of meat to be cut, and the rest to be processed into kernels. In the end, they received 82 cores in return. Bennett, though still jealous, thanked Michael for the deal and expressed hope that their paths would cross again someday. As he watched, Michael reflected on the importance of cooperating with others to survive in such a world. Afterwards, he and his companions went to the machine shop to check on the progress of the construction of their portable shelter. Michael asked Benjamin if the construction was finished. He replied that they needed 2 more hours, and asked if the hero would like to add anything else. Upon hearing this, Michael demanded a full suit of armor, equipped with a reinforcement system and built-in weapons. With a sly smile, he decided to test the engineers to see if they could create something truly grandiose. Benjamin replied dryly that it was possible, but only at the staggering price of 1,000,000 cores. He explained that they were still researching the armor to enhance durability and had yet to fix the critical flaw. Irritated, he looked sternly at one of his subordinates, warning him not to divulge details that he had no right to divulge. Finally, he admitted that the armor lacked sufficient energy to operate quickly and efficiently. Michael could hardly contain his excitement and asked about the size and weight of the armor. Benjamin replied that the latest version weighs a whole ton and reaches 2.5 meters in height. He presented the design to the group, demonstrating a huge structure that required a huge amount of energy to operate. Out of curiosity, Michael wondered if there was a way to reduce weight by using more common materials. Benjamin, however, explained that only by removing some of the protective modules could the weight be reduced, and even then by no more than 100 kilograms. He added that even with huge sums of money, it would be virtually impossible to build exactly what the hero had in mind. Michael, however, stood his ground, stating that he still needed the armor, and then Benjamin said that he needed 1,000 cores for it. Then the hero suggested replacing the heavier modules with cheaper parts that only imitated the appearance of real armor. The workers, although skeptical, agreed to make such a suit, even though it might be fragile and short-lived. One of them asked angrily if Michael intended to steal their technology. They joked about how absurd it was for a simple auto mechanic to dream of creating power armor. Undeterred, Michael suggested that the girls take a shower and buy clean clothes while they waited. Olivia and Ella, however, exchanged worried glances, fearing that the hero's rash request could end badly. But he reassured them, insisting he knew what he was doing before following Benjamin deeper into the workshop. Benjamin invited him to step onto the circular platform, explaining that it would scan his physical data. Michael obeyed, and the machine began to work, beams of light passing over his body, recording every detail. Then, to his surprise, the automated system began assembling the armor at an impressive speed. Intrigued, Michael asked if he could participate in the assembly process himself to see how it worked. Benjamin agreed, but demanded 60 cores as payment for the lessons. When Michael joked about stealing technology, Benjamin silenced him. Embarrassed, Michael apologized and began to study the process. Meanwhile, the girls finally enjoyed a hot shower. Ella was extremely happy to feel truly clean again. She even offered her friend to wash her back. Then she noticed that Olivia had become strangely thoughtful. It turned out she was worried about their dwindling funds and how much Michael was spending. Ella's friend tried to cheer her up, saying that the most important thing was the hero's safety and happiness. She added that if anyone dared to mock him, they would defend him without hesitation. Soon a message came that the armor was ready, and the girls were invited back to the laboratory. As Ella walked to the lab, she decided that she would protect Michael from ridicule if he failed. There, in the center of the room, a bright light illuminated a mechanical platform, and one by one, the armor components fell into place. An impressive structure appeared before their eyes. And then Michael donned the armor. The girls gasped at the sight of this. It was truly an unusual sight. Michael fiddled a bit with the helmet, which also had engines attached, but managed to fasten it. Yet, as he tried to take his first step, the armor shattered, the pieces scattered across the floor, and Michael collapsed right on top of them. The girls screamed in fear, clearly not expecting something like this to happen. Then Benjamin rushed to help, muttering that the ventilation system had failed. Around them, workers burst into laughter, deriding the creation as nothing more than a cheap plastic toy. But Ella snapped back angrily, saying it was none of their business. However, Michael patted her head to reassure her. He admitted that they were right, that the suit was flimsy. It looked more like a toy, but it still had a special function. The armor had one remarkable feature. It created experience continuously, minute after minute. Benjamin explained, however, that it wasn't really a toy after all. He showed Michael the energy converter, warning that it required replacement every 24 hours and consumed a huge amount of energy. In response, Michael nodded gratefully and told Benjamin that he hoped they would continue to work together in the future. In the camp, one man shouted with joy because he was able to awaken a special ability within himself. His companions crowded around him, celebrating the birth of another genius. Intrigued, Michael, wearing his new armor, walked up and asked what this place was. One of the men explained that this was a place where revivals were held, but the process cost 10 cores per person. Without hesitation, Michael handed over the requested amount, deciding that his comrades should have the same chance. He called Olivia forward, saying he wanted to invest in her development. He noticed that he could not afford to have ordinary people in his group. It had to become more useful. The girls froze when they heard these cruel words, but then they realized that he was just teasing. Embarrassed but grateful, Olivia agreed, touched by his gesture. Michael then added that without her, he probably would have died long ago. Determined to become stronger, Olivia stepped onto the awakening platform. Meanwhile, her friends wished her luck. Suddenly, a wave of purple energy washed over her, piercing her body with pain. However, Olivia gritted her teeth, determined not to hold Michael responsible for the failed attempt. Her screams filled the space around her as the energy transformed her from within, shadows swirling around her. Finally, the tension overwhelmed her and she lost consciousness. Michael picked her up in his arms, deeply concerned about her condition. When Olivia moved, the first thing she asked was for him to remove the armor from his belt. Confused, Michael hesitated, but then the suit began to come apart. He wondered if she wanted to take revenge on him in front of everyone. But instead, Olivia reached out and gently placed her hand on his old wound, a soft green light emanating from her fingers. The pain soon subsided as the torn flesh healed, and Olivia explained that one of her awakened abilities was healing. However, its limits were strict. It could restore life and heal injuries. Olivia couldn't heal wounds that were too severe or resurrect anyone. Intrigued, Michael asked if the sanctuary could detect abilities that had already awakened. He then encouraged Ella to try to obtain the ability as well. She immediately stepped onto the platform, where she was enveloped in a blue aura that made the girl gasp. When the process was over, Michael asked what had happened, but she hesitated, clearly confused. Ella then stammered that she couldn't read, to the astonishment of the others. Michael immediately remembered that she was born after the apocalypse, and said that it was no wonder she lacked such skills. Trying to somehow brighten the situation, Ella promised that she could at least draw what she saw. Olivia consoled her, and Michael, in order not to interfere with the process further, removed the remains of his fragile armor. He then stepped onto the platform himself. He reasoned that if his awakening gave him an enhancing ability, it would ensure the future of their entire group. The moment the process began, a searing pain shot through him as dark energy enveloped him. A screen appeared before his eyes, displaying fragments of information about his ability. To his horror, he identified power as a concept. Michael stepped back in confusion, wondering why the system had chosen to say so little about the ability. When the awakening process was complete, he hung in the air for a moment, still feeling disoriented. Then Michael fell, but his face landed right on Olivia's chest, which softened the blow a lot. Olivia anxiously asked if he had failed the test, but Michael replied that his abilities were of the conceptual type. He then asked what class her abilities were, and the girl replied that her abilities were of the rule type. At that moment, Ella drew the strange symbols she had seen during her awakening. From this, the group was able to decipher the nature of her abilities. Her friends were amazed by her impeccable memory, they noted. But Ella herself decided that they were silent because she had very weak abilities. However, Michael said with genuine admiration that she was incredibly strong, and the young girl beamed, pleased with his praise. The heroine couldn't help but think about how she lost her parents when she was only 5 years old, and how she had survived the apocalypse since then. So he wondered if the awakening of such abilities was somehow connected to the hardships and traumas of life in this world. Olivia then noted that her companion's strength would prove invaluable for protection. Afterwards, the girls hugged Michael, grateful that together they had become stronger. As the boys walked to their shelter, they noticed that the survivors were being expelled from the camp for refusing to join the safe zone. Using his armor, Michael led the girls outside the perimeter in search of a place for their own base. The atmosphere outside the walls seemed tense. Suddenly, they came across a group of survivors, among whom Michael recognized Bennett, and the man invited him to join their ranks. However, Michael politely declined, saying that he preferred independence and thanked him for the offer. He noted that many people, like himself, have no desire to live within the strict confines of a safe zone. Then Ella noticed the tree and enthusiastically suggested building her house nearby. After examining the area, the hero agreed that this was the ideal place. Activating the device, he watched as the compact box unfolded and grew larger before their eyes. The structure soon grew into a large container home. Michael explained that this was only the initial module and that assembly was required. Then the girls volunteered to cook dinner, leaving the physical work to him. Michael assured them that he could handle it and set to work. As he worked, he noticed that each part he installed rewarded him with valuable experience points. Soon the house was ready. But to his disappointment, the place looked more like a public toilet than a home. The girls, on the other hand, were delighted and eager to explore their new hideout. Michael described the house as simple but functional, consisting of 3 rooms and a solar panel. That night they lay down in bed, grateful to finally have a safe place to sleep for the first time in 3 years. Then the system reported new information. The shelter could be improved, and the hero was immediately filled with anticipation. Meanwhile, a minor altercation broke out between the girls when Ella scolded her friend for getting into bed in dirty clothes. Before Michael could intervene, the two had already rushed off to the shower, laughing and shouting along the way. Then he decided to watch from the outside. The man thought that now that they had their own home, they finally deserved some peace. Meanwhile, his skeletal armor had also reached its maximum durability, opening up the possibility of upgrades. Relieved, Michael was amazed at how freely he could now move within it. To his surprise, the update also revealed a built-in radar capable of scanning the surrounding environment. Activating it, he saw a map appear in his field of view, displaying the features of the area. Then suddenly a red dot appeared on the display. Michael stared at it, but the image disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. He wondered if it was a night monster or just a system glitch. Meanwhile, in the observation room, the operator presented satellite images showing the aftermath of the air blast. Tongues of flame shot up and out emerged a huge monster with one eye and a very long tongue. General Juan, whose face reflected fear, immediately recognized him as the ghost. Lieutenant Colonel Clyde informed him that the creature was only 700 meters from the base. Major John, stunned, suggested leaving their fortress altogether. But suddenly another person intervened, saying that this was just the beginning and insisting that retreat was not an option. They had to prepare for the coming battle, no matter the cost. Commander Philip then ordered all the custom-made refrigerators at their disposal to be assembled in preparation for battle. But at dawn the girls woke up, stretched lazily and prepared to meet whatever was to come. Michael checked the system again and found that their portable apartment had also reached its maximum comfort level. His heart beat wildly at the thought of strengthening it. Noticing his excitement, Ella asked curiously what he was planning. He then told her that he had dreamed of a bountiful rice harvest, which made her laugh. He then immediately set about improving it. Suddenly, a bright blue aura enveloped the house, and the girls screamed in fear as the building shook and changed right before their eyes. As the light faded, the safe house became a larger, more solid, and much more beautiful building. Michael felt a sense of satisfaction. It no longer resembled the primitive toilet that had previously depressed him. Now it was a solar portable shelter, a portable house with a built-in solar lamp that was safer. However, he wondered whether the system also provided the integrated features he had once asked for. Olivia and Ella, however, had a more pressing problem: the stifling heat. The temperature had risen to 70 degrees, and they were visibly worried. Michael also noted that the climate is indeed getting worse. He told them that they would need to get ready soon and head to the safe zone for supplies. Once everything was packed, Michael announced that he was ready to show them a miracle. Pressing a hidden button on the wall, he initiated another transformation. In an instant, the entire house folded in on itself, neatly folding back into its portable box. The girls couldn't believe that this was actually possible. The incredibly heavy house was now transformed into an object weighing no more than 20 kilograms and could be lifted without much effort. The girls looked at Mike in amazement, calling him incredible. Olivia remarked that it looked like something out of a movie. Then, to save time, Michael suggested that they split up and each buy different supplies. Meanwhile, a large crowd had already gathered at the base to receive assignments. Michael blended in with the crowd, determined to complete one of these tasks for the experience. The inspector explained the procedure, emphasizing that each part had a unique serial number and must be assembled in a precise order. Michael took the box of components, noting the army's growing concern about the looming threats. He then focused on his work. Piece by piece he assembled the cooler with skill. When the first one was completed, the system rewarded him with 1 experience point, the ease of obtaining which delighted the hero. Eager for more, he continued building cooler after cooler, his experience steadily growing as he created parts. Exhausted, Michael finally completed his task, tired but deeply satisfied with the result. Despite the effort, he felt joy in the experience, convinced that every action was worth it. Thanks to his accumulated experience, he managed to rise to the 6th level. However, his joy was marred by disappointment. At some point, Michael noticed that he had only advanced 3 levels. However, when he leaned against the tree, the trunk suddenly broke under his hand. At that very moment, the hero realized that his physical strength had increased significantly thanks to his leveling up. Suddenly the hero heard familiar voices calling his name. When Michael looked away, he realized that his companions were approaching him. His surprise increased when he noticed how his vision and reaction speed had sharpened. Now he was not afraid of either close combat or long-range combat. Olivia and Ella returned with water and supplies, explaining that they had bought a large quantity of water and had even received a cooler as a gift. Encouraged by this, Michael asked Olivia for her gun, promising that he could fix it. As soon as she handed it over, he activated his ability and successfully restored the weapon, earning additional experience in the process. Not stopping there, he asked Ella for a crossbow, assuring her that he would improve it as well. She proudly handed it to him, noting that she had trained hard with him. Michael then upgraded the weapon to level 5, significantly increasing its range and power. He realized how much valuable experience he had gained from these improvements. But suddenly an alarm rang out, signaling that a horde of monsters was just 6 kilometers away. Panic instantly spread among the survivors. They screamed in terror that the creatures were approaching and rushed to grab their things. Michael then ordered the girls to follow him, ready to face the new danger at their side. Chaos reigned in the fortress. Soldiers and civilians fled in despair, trying to find a safe place. Michael noticed with surprise that the soldiers were dismantling the cannons from the walls, although he did not yet understand the reason. Soon the defenders took up a firm position, declaring that they would not allow the monsters to break through. On command, the artillery opened fire, and cannon salvos thundered at the approaching horde. Michael's group soon came across the massive body of a wolf, knocked down by one of the explosions. He immediately realized that a huge wave of monsters had now descended upon the base. As it turned out, the situation was much more dire than he feared. In the control room, military officers watched the events with tension. One soldier reported to the commander that the evacuation had not even begun yet, and a monstrous tide had already covered them. The commander was indignant that ordinary people would not have enough time to escape. Then the officer suggested a desperate measure, to use the underground water system against the monsters. Philip declared that the time had finally come to reveal what he called Tenyun's miracle. Meanwhile, the soldiers continued to fire, their guns creating a wall of flame and smoke against the wolves. The survivors were ordered to evacuate while the army held off the onslaught. Civilians ran in panic in different directions. Some of them even climbed the walls. Everyone was in a hurry to get to the safe zone before the beasts caught up with them. However, the commander ordered his men to cover the retreat of only those who obeyed. However, Philip countered that their enemies were not only monsters, and that larger decisions had to be made to survive. So he ordered that fire be opened and the wave of beasts be turned off course, and that the city walls be defended. At that moment, a powerful explosion occurred in the middle of the battlefield, destroying several dozen monsters at once. Then Philip shouted that the road was clear. Now the people had to run. Immediately after this, the gates opened, behind which a whole crowd of people were hiding. Michael and his comrades moved forward, following the soldiers to the safe zone. He commanded his girlfriends to run as fast as they could while the road was safe. Ella noted that the animals were afraid of something, and Olivia realized that the air temperature had suddenly risen. At that moment, Ella stopped from a strong sense of danger. She immediately turned to Michael and screamed that there was a wolf right behind him. As it turns out, Michael's group encountered a 2-headed ghost wolf of danger level. Without hesitation, Michael opened fire on them, his reinforced armor protecting him from their attacks. Soon the wave of wolves was defeated, and Michael's weapon was smoking from such intense use. The other survivors watched him with awe, whispering among themselves about the mysterious ability that gave him such strength. Michael then calmly explained that his armor's radar could detect enemies within 100 meters. Ella's eyes widened in delight at the incredible capabilities of his equipment. But the battlefield was far from calm. Suddenly the earth opened up and underground monsters appeared. A huge worm, its mouth filled with sharp teeth, emerged from the ground and rushed at the group. The survivors screamed, paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, one unfortunate man was grabbed and dragged into the mouth of these creatures. Without thinking, Michael shot the worm, and his shots saved others from the same fate. The grateful survivors expressed their gratitude, but they knew they had to escape urgently. Ella narrowly escaped attack by another underground beast. Michael then activated his armor's thrusters and took to the skies, skillfully maneuvering to evade attacks while preparing to counterattack. He fired straight from the air, dealing a ton of damage to the monsters at once. Amidst the chaos, Ella stumbled upon the monster's core, her eyes lighting up with anticipation at the discovery. However, before she could celebrate, a woman from another group snatched it from her hands and tried to run away. Using a strange balloon-like ability, the thief soared upwards to escape. However, she was soon intercepted by her previous group, and was forced to return the stolen core. As it turned out, these people decided to make a deal with Michael. They would lure out the monsters while he would destroy them. Without thinking twice, the hero agreed, and Ella received the core back. In the end, the group did their part of the job, attracting the creature's attention. Meanwhile, Michael used his weapon with destructive force. Powerful shots passed through the monsters, and with the support of his armor, he managed to destroy the horde. However, suddenly more monsters appeared. Michael realized that they had stumbled upon a nest of monsters, and ordered the girls to retreat with the core. At that moment, the same core hunter appeared behind Ella, and in the blink of an eye she grabbed the precious item. But Michael was still pleased that this meeting allowed him to gain even more experience for his pistol. Gathering his resolve, he further refined his weapon, preparing for a deadly confrontation. Then he shot at the annoying girl who still wouldn't let go of the cannonball. The explosion destroyed the enemy, leaving even Michael's allies speechless. The blonde screamed in shock when she saw the power of his shot, and Michael declared that no one should raise a hand against his comrades. The frightened boys immediately grabbed their partner and dragged her away from harm's way, apologizing to Michael along the way. Soon Olivia showed them the cores she had managed to collect. Then the three finally introduced themselves, saying that they were on the same team. Their names were Sam, Silas, and Sally. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a flushed Olivia. She complained about the stifling heat. She insisted that they needed to leave this area. Michael agreed to continue the journey, and the group prepared to move on. But suddenly Ella fell to her knees from the unbearable heat. Alarmed, Michael rushed to her and hugged her, urging her to be patient. Meanwhile, Olivia quickly brought water to prevent the girl from becoming dehydrated. However, Michael refused, explaining that they had to conserve every drop of their supplies, and that Ella would recover if she rested. However, he himself understood that this could not continue any longer. Otherwise, they would all be doomed. Then suddenly Olivia remembered the cooler they had been given earlier, a device that could lower the temperature of water. When Michael asked where it was, she replied that it was still in her backpack. He noted that the cooler gained a lot of experience thanks to his work with it, and then the hero improved the device and discovered a new function. Now the cooler could reduce the ambient temperature within a radius of 3 kilometers. By activating it, Michael finally allowed the girls to breathe a sigh of relief. The girls admired his power as the air finally cooled and their fatigue eased. Ella gradually regained consciousness. Michael then modestly noted that he had only slightly improved the device, although Olivia doubted him. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the girls hugged him, delighted by this saving cold. Embarrassed, Michael felt the warmth of their embrace, and it seemed as if the air became hotter for him too. After this, the guys decided to rest a little under the dome, under which it was very fresh. But their peace did not last long. Soon they saw a group of people hurrying from the safe zone. Their bodies were enveloped in a strange blue mist that gave them unnatural speed. As he watched, Michael realized that the fog itself was the source of their acceleration, but he also sensed that it was dangerous. Olivia said wistfully that she wished she had something like that to speed up her pace. Then she tried to stick her finger out from under the dome, but a small flame immediately formed on it. She complained that in such conditions, when the temperature reached almost 70 degrees, even her own abilities burned her out. Trying to combat the heat, she used her gift of healing to summon a sphere of healing water. Other survivors laughed at her, predicting that she would soon die of dehydration. Michael's group watched the proceedings in silence. Meanwhile, desperate survivors ran towards them, and Michael prepared himself for whatever might happen. Inside the cooled zone, the temperature dropped to 15 degrees, and the girls complained of a sudden cold. However, Michael reminded them that the water outside their bubble would evaporate in seconds. Olivia then came up with a new idea, using a refrigerator's condenser to collect water from the air. The girl said that she saw on a survival show that metal and smooth objects can collect condensation, and by a lucky chance, there was a perfectly flat stone right next to her. She struck the stone with a hammer, carving out a smooth-sided indentation, preparing the surface for collection. After placing the cooler on the rock, Olivia explained that the device would gradually draw moisture from the air. However, when she looked up, she realized that Michael was gone and wondered out loud where he had gone. At that moment, he climbed out of the hole, saying that he would leave this matter to her. Soon after, Michael brought in some bundles of brushwood, and when asked if it was for making a fire, he shook his head. He replied that it was for practice, as he intended to sharpen the strength of his hands by carving wood. Watching him, Ella offered to stand guard while he trained. While working, the hero noticed that the cooler had already reached the 7th level. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he improved it once again. Meanwhile, in the safe zone, people struggled to conserve water in accordance with strict military regulations. Suddenly the young woman tripped, dropping boxes of supplies and falling to the ground. Her friend rushed to her side, concerned about her well-being. The woman fainted, her body burning with fever, and onlookers began to wonder whether it was heat stroke or awakening. One man called for help, saying she needed medical attention. Some survivors whispered anxiously among themselves about whether military doctors would be able to help an ordinary citizen. Suddenly, an elderly man said gloomily that the soldiers only cared about their own survival. Soon the unconscious woman was lifted onto a stretcher, and the man explained that people with a high temperature have only 2 options. When the paramedics arrived, the crowd nervously wondered if she would be able to wake up with the help of the fire technique. But the old man's face turned pale with horror, because before their eyes the woman began to writhe and change. Horror gripped the people as they saw her body transform into that of a monster. When the survivors realized that she had turned into a creature, they immediately shot her. Completely transformed, the woman turned into a fiery monster. Everyone was horrified, not understanding whether turning into a monster was really the only way out. Soon, shots were heard from the safe zone, and upon hearing them, Michael frowned and wondered what could have happened. Suddenly the girls called out to him. Olivia explained that their plan would need to be modified. She indicated that the cooler was no longer effectively condensing water. The problem was that the temperature was not low enough to extract enough moisture from the air. Instead, she suggested digging a well. Michael, however, clenched his fist and split the rock, declaring that the earth itself was cracking and that water would not be so easy to find. The girls then anxiously asked what they should do, but Michael only replied that they would just have to wait. However, he bitterly admitted that even providing water has become an impossible task in this world. However, he assured them that once he defeated the monsters, they would drink as much as they wanted. He then asked them to help him find materials to make a bow and arrow, explaining that they could not run forever and needed to strengthen themselves. At the same time, he wanted to go to a safe zone and buy an airplane. Michael firmly believed that with his abilities, he would make it better, and that the plane would be able to fight monsters. However, Ella had serious doubts that the plane could kill. Olivia objected to him, insisting that he was talking nonsense and should give up this stupid idea. But Michael, adamant, insisted he was serious. He stated that his abilities would make the plan possible, and that through it they would receive strength and water. Despite their doubts, the girls decided to trust him as their leader. Then Michael convinced them to believe in him, and promised that they would not die from thirst or heat. Finally, the girls agreed to follow his plan. The group soon set out to search for materials, ready for their new mission. Michael realized that the monsters they encountered emitted heat and light so powerful that ordinary people turned to ash. The fire monster they saw earlier was not unique. The fact is that people themselves can turn into monsters. To prevent the end of the world, these creatures had to be destroyed. Looking up at the sky, the hero realized that they had little time left before the heat intensified. At that moment, he remembered that he had been wearing a combat exoskeleton for a long time. He also remembered that he could probably improve it. Entering his armor, he activated its enhancement. A bright light engulfed him, his armor transforming into a more sleek, modern design. The system introduced a new design that proved to be much more flexible and powerful than the previous one. The new armor increased his speed and maneuverability, making him stronger than before. It was capable of withstanding sniper fire and had a radar with a range of 200 meters. The system congratulated him, assuring him that he no longer needed to carry around his old armor. Michael was filled with joy when he realized that the armor was not an illusion, but a tangible reality. To test its capabilities, he activated the new radar, which immediately detected the creature at a distance of 200 meters. A 2-headed rat appeared on the display, and Michael was amazed at how detailed the image was. Excited, he turned on the engines, wanting to test the speed and strength of the armor. With one powerful leap, he soared into the sky, moving with astonishing agility. The hero then landed next to the rat, startling the small creature with his sudden appearance. Then, with one blow of his fist, he shattered the ground where the creature had just been sitting. He was amazed by the speed of the photon engines and soon landed, the impact of which split the ground and left behind a huge crater. The demonstration of the exoskeleton's power filled him with joy, and the hero noted the strength and speed of his new equipment. However, Michael was tormented by the question when he remembered that the system had said that he no longer needed to wear armor. His confusion increased when, without warning, the armor began to disassemble before his eyes. Fear gripped him as the massive structure split into more compact pieces that attached themselves to his body. At that moment, he realized that the armor could compress into a portable form, meaning he no longer had to carry those weights. Michael immediately tested this compact version, and remembering the importance of endurance in combat, he thought about the energy core. He quickly replaced the old one, but as he watched the readings, he noticed that the core's energy had increased significantly. Surprised by this unexpected improvement, Michael began to wonder if the core had been improved along with the armor itself. Filled with delight, he pressed his lips to the armor as if he had found a real treasure. However, his girlfriends, seeing this, were shocked, deciding that he had completely lost his mind. Before he could continue, Olivia warned him that the safe zone had moved away again. She explained that it was unclear what had happened, but they suddenly gathered their things and left. Ella admitted that she felt uneasy, suspecting that another wave of danger might soon arrive. A worried Michael suggested that they follow the group to remain under its protection. They ran quickly to keep up with the group, realizing that they needed speed if they wanted to stay safe. Still, Michael wondered about the strange fog that surrounded them, and whether he could have acquired it for himself. Eventually, they hid behind a tree, and Olivia noted that her strength had increased, allowing her to carry more weight than before. Michael, wanting to cheer the girls up, offered to carry the rest if they got tired. However, the girls decided not to become a burden for their hero. Michael then assured them that the route ahead should be safe, as the army had already passed along it. However, as they continued on their way, they came across a battlefield littered with corpses and debris from devices. Ella trembled with fear as she realized that this was a battlefield. Michael noticed that the weapons had been carefully collected from the bodies, with almost nothing left. Then Olivia noticed that there were a lot of mouths to feed in the safe zone. However, Ella became worried, guessing that the soldiers must have encountered a powerful monster. But Michael urged the group to quicken their pace if they wanted to catch up with the others. Having heard the order, the girls immediately agreed. They followed the tracks left by the group and finally spotted a safe zone about a kilometer ahead. But Michael insisted that they maintain some distance so as not to be mistaken for enemies. He realized that the mysterious mist was not just an ability, as it persisted much longer than it should have. Ella then warned him that the group's speed had increased as they were now climbing a hill. The girl soon complained about the grueling pace, wondering if the people in the safe zone ever allowed themselves to rest. Michael came to the conclusion that they would eventually need to get a vehicle if they wanted to get around more efficiently. Olivia grumbled that the fog seemed to be forcing them up and down the hills non-stop. Michael soon realized that they were heading towards a hotter and more dangerous place. Olivia then complained again about the rise in temperature, admitting that she hadn't even noticed the heat before due to the cooling effect of the gear. But suddenly she tripped and fell to the ground, completely exhausted. An alarmed Michael rushed to her side, concerned about her well-being, and Olivia said she had simply taken too long to walk. At the same time, Ella cried, admitting that she could no longer walk. Realizing the gravity of their situation, Michael realized that if they continued at this pace, they would never be able to catch up with the safe zone. At that moment, Bennett and his group appeared and invited them to join. However, Sally complained, saying that they were weak and would only slow everyone down. Michael, not wanting to appear weak, declined the offer, saying they didn't need help. Instead, it upgraded its armor, allowing it to carry more weight and increasing its radar range. With surprising ease, he lifted the two girls into his arms, leaving the others stunned by his strength. Suddenly, there was an explosion ahead, and they saw the group from the safe zone surrounded by danger. Several flying discs appeared in the sky, and the girls screamed in horror, confused by these strange devices. Michael quickly realized that a new wave of monsters was attacking the safe zone. Ella shuddered in fear, as she realized the horde was much larger than the one they had encountered before. The discs emitted bright beams of light, destroying the monsters with destructive force. Realizing the danger of the situation, Michael came to the conclusion that they must flee immediately, otherwise they risked being caught in the battle. But before they could escape, a colossal stone hand rose from the ground, blocking their path. A giant golem rose from the ground and suddenly destroyed one of the flying machines with one blow. Then Michael called on his friends to run, while he stayed behind to face the monsters in his armor. By abandoning their supplies to move faster, he prioritized their survival. A moment later, one of the alien machines crashed next to them. Michael screamed desperately, ordering everyone to lie down on the ground and not move. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a monstrous creature with huge fangs and tentacles appeared. At that moment, several soldiers descended from the sky, fully armed and ready to face the monster. They began their attack, slashing at the creature's tentacles with weapons of immense power. The soldiers continued their battle with the monstrous enemy without surrendering. Soon, the fallen alien machines were recalled, which greatly surprised the protagonist. However, Michael and his group moved on with the evacuation forces, trying to leave the danger zone. Ella, however, noted that not all the cars had been restored. She explained that she had counted 8 of them, and Olivia then expressed surprise that in the chaos she had somehow kept count. Hearing this, Michael became even more excited at the thought of getting his hands on these things. But the girls didn't really share his enthusiasm, as usual. They soon came across the wreckage of the fallen flying saucer, and realized with some disappointment that it had all been destroyed. However, Michael remained adamant, determined to search for spare parts in the hopes of one day building a complete vessel. Meanwhile, Sally watched their efforts from afar, and dismissed Michael's idea as nothing more than a silly fantasy. However, Sam noted that the flying saucer was indeed a powerful weapon, and so it was hardly surprising that someone would want to possess it. However, Silas still doubted the usefulness of searching for fragments when every ship lay in ruins. Sally added that even if by some miracle they managed to reassemble it, they would not be able to exchange it for food or essentials. At this point, the group made it clear to Michael that they would no longer be with them. Undeterred, Michael continued his search, determined to find the fragments. The girls, not wanting to leave him to struggle alone, joined him, ready to help in the recovery work. Their dedication touched Mike deeply as he saw the girls working so hard for him. They worked hard to pull the flying saucer out from under the wreckage. Suddenly, the device finally emerged from under the ground, but it happened so unexpectedly that the guys simply flew back and fell. When Michael regained consciousness, to his surprise, he discovered that the flying saucer was almost intact. A thrill of excitement filled him as he examined it closely, marveling at how such a massive structure could withstand flight. At that moment, Olivia stepped forward and announced that she might be able to help fix it. She explained that her unique abilities allow her to restore broken objects. Michael then immediately pointed to the flying saucer, asking Olivia to try to restore it. Placing her hand on the broken shell of the device, the woman called upon her power, blue energy spreading from her palm and enveloping the device. Concentrating with all her might, she forced the debris into the air, piece by piece securing itself in place. Michael could hardly believe what he was witnessing. His girlfriend's abilities seemed almost miraculous. But Olivia looked depressing. She was clearly putting a lot of effort into this. Deeply concerned about her well-being, Michael insisted that she needed rest, but she said she couldn't afford to stop yet. Soon the restored flying saucer was hovering above the ground. Ella expressed her amazement at her friend's abilities. But then, exhausted beyond measure, Olivia lost consciousness and fell into Michael's arms. Then Michael hurried to set up their portable shelter. He placed the box with the house on the ground and pressed the activation button. But before their eyes, the structure unfolded and assembled itself. Ella rushed inside, worried about her friend. Michael then carried the unconscious Olivia to the bed and carefully laid her down, making sure she was comfortable. When he made sure the girl was okay and went outside, his gaze fell on the flying saucer. He decided to take it apart piece by piece, intending to study its structure and even try to improve it. Ella readily offered her help, explaining that her photographic memory would allow her to preserve every detail. Then Michael activated the armor scanning function. The system showed that the ship consists of exactly 13,034 parts, divided into 12 main sections. Although he was overwhelmed by the apparent complexity, he was grateful for the new scanning feature. He then asked Ella to inspect the flying saucer for any hidden dangers or self-destruct devices. The hero noted to himself that her talent was doubly valuable, since it allowed her to help them in this way as well. After carefully examining the device, the girl assured him that it was safe, finding no signs of threat. Feeling relieved, Michael began the delicate process of disassembling. Soon his armor detected a Bluetooth signal and asked if he wanted to connect. When the hero connected, the system showed that the flying saucer had been restored to factory settings. Michael was pleasantly surprised to realize that Ella's power had not only repaired the body, but had completely renewed the car. He laughed out loud, unable to contain his happiness, certain that he had stumbled upon a priceless treasure. Without further ado, he set a new 38-digit password, becoming the rightful owner of the flying saucer. He now had full access to its functions, including the self-destruct sequence. The hero felt a surge of relief that the monster had damaged the ship just enough for him to take it. With a smile, he told Ella that they no longer had to live in constant fear of monsters. Then, impatient, Ella urged him to test the flying saucer immediately. Michael immediately activated the neural interface, linking his mind with the restored system. Instantly, the flying saucer came to life, its engines glowing as it rose into the air. Ella admired its silent ascent, unable to comprehend the secret of such flawless technology. Michael, however, quickly realized that the machine was based on anti-gravity technology. The device accelerated, soon reaching a speed of 170 meters per second. The boys were amazed by such an incredible speed. Still, Michael began to act more cautiously. realizing that such speed could attract the attention of lurking monsters. Ella then asked if a flying saucer could carry people, and Michael assured her that it could. He climbed onto the boat while the delighted girl captured the moment. Michael then struck several poses, as if showing pride in his new acquisition. However, the system suddenly issued a warning stating that his weight of 80 kilograms exceeded safe parameters. In frustration, he ordered the system to shut up, but this rash command cost him dearly. As a result, the flying saucer suddenly lost stability and threw the hero hard onto the ground. Alarmed, Ella immediately rushed to his side, although Michael was shocked and insisted that he was not hurt. However, he acknowledged that it could not yet carry passengers reliably and would require further improvement. He thought that once Olivia woke up, she would no doubt be amazed to see the improved ship. The hero then decided to strengthen the flying saucer so that they could use it to escape if its condition worsened. He asked Ella to use her exceptional memory to record every step of the disassembly process. She readily agreed, her eyes focused and every detail imprinted in her memory. Together they set to work. Michael carefully disassembled the flying saucer while Ella memorized every movement. At some point he discovered a long pipe and was surprised by its unusual length. To his amazement, the hero discovered that the device contained not only advanced systems, but also weapons, in particular, a missile compartment. Michael also soon discovered that it had a total of 1,000 missiles installed on it. He realized that the ship had been built solely for destruction, and was literally packed with guns and deadly equipment. Then Michael allowed himself to smile, realizing how much incredible firepower was now in his hands. However, Ella kept an eye on his work, and warned him when he was about to assemble a part incorrectly. Her advice saved him from making a mistake, and he thanked her sincerely, admitting that without her, he could not have completed the task. Finally, the hero tightened the last screw, and the flying saucer became operational again. Michael asked himself if everything was ready now. Suddenly, a soft blue light enveloped the ship, and it prepared for the test. The system reported new technical characteristics. The restored vessel was now capable of carrying a whole 1,000 kilograms. Michael came to the realization that the experience required to fly a flying saucer was less demanding than that required to make armor. Filled with determination, he explained to Ella that he intended to improve the ship. However, Ella looked visibly exhausted after all the effort they had gone through. With concern in his voice, Michael offered her a bottle of water so she could recover. But to his surprise, Ella refused, insisting that he save it for Olivia. Her selfless sacrifice struck the hero to the very heart. However, Michael carefully fed her, assuring her that they had enough food and water to feed them all. Touched by her brother's kindness and attention, Ella accepted the food. However, her strength soon left her. She pushed the plate away, unable to continue eating, and soon fatigue completely overcame her. Ella fell asleep, her body exhausted by both the work and the unbearable heat. Then Michael carefully picked her up and carried her to the shelter. He carefully laid her on the empty bed. He then turned to check on Olivia, who was still fast asleep, though he was relieved to see that her condition had improved. Leaving the house, Michael prepared for further business. He immediately realized that the temperature outside was steadily rising, and the drought was getting worse with each passing hour. His suspicions were soon confirmed when a giant fiery monster appeared in the distance. He saw several survivors suffering from dehydration, and he realized that water would soon become the most pressing need. At the same time, he wondered how he could gain experience with the ship by flying it or firing its weapons. However, Michael soon discovered that even a simple act, such as allowing the craft to rise into the air, gave him valuable experience. This discovery amazed him, as it meant that he could make progress without having to put in the effort of fighting. Having quickly developed a strategy, the hero decided to leave the flying saucer hanging in the air, accumulating experience. Half an hour later, Michael returned to check what had happened and was surprised by the result. The vessel's diameter has increased to 4 meters, and its technical characteristics have been significantly improved. Then the hero realized that the flying saucer could now carry passengers. Eager to test this new feature, he climbed aboard, ready to explore its transport capabilities. However, his hopes were dashed almost immediately when the system warned him that his weight had once again exceeded the acceptable limit. However, before the hero could react further, a sudden threat arose. Some mysterious creature launched an attack on his ship, prompting the system to ask if it wanted to strike back. Confused, Michael tried to figure out what had attacked him, but sharp claws had already dug into the device, tearing through the metal casing. Then the hero put up a flying saucer as a shield. But suddenly the enemy appeared right behind him. A huge wolf leaped straight at Michael, its claws tearing at the ship, its red eyes blazing with wild malice. However, Michael, with a quick movement, jumped high above the creature, intending to deliver a crushing blow from the air. As he descended, his armored fist struck with tremendous force, causing the ground beneath him to shake. The blow threw the wolf back, but to his horror, he recovered with alarming speed. Michael then reluctantly activated the cannon built into his armor, although he was worried about the possibility of damaging the flying saucer. He fired an energy beam that hit the ground with explosive force, but the next moment the hero realized that the wolf had disappeared. His speed was so incredible that even the armor's advanced radar could not track him. Then Michael concentrated all his attention, trying to predict where the monster would come from. Alarm filled him, and he turned to find the wolf right behind him, preparing to attack. At this decisive moment, the hero still managed to land a direct blow. His blow hit its target, and the wolf, badly wounded, fell to the ground, and for a moment Michael thought the battle was won. However, the beast, not wanting to die, began to retreat. Michael immediately screamed in horror when he saw the direction the monster was running. It was running straight towards his house where Olivia and Ella were. Meanwhile, Ella woke up from a sudden noise, not understanding what was happening. But when she opened the door, she came face to face with a giant wolf, and she screamed in terror as the beast pounced on her with its claws. When she had no other choice, Michael came to her aid and shot the monster several times. He managed to catch up with the wolf, saving his friend at the very last moment. Then he realized that only his improved pistol was capable of penetrating the creature's defenses. Shocked, Ella rushed towards him and clung to his arms, sobbing because she was almost eaten. Michael tried to console her, because the monster was already dead. He then suggested that she could drink some of the monster's blood before it curdled. At first, Ella recoiled, admitting she wasn't ready to do it. However, she soon forced herself to overcome her fear and drank the blood, deciding to pay back for the horror that the beast had caused her. Michael wondered if the blood was dangerous, but soon saw that the girl looked pleased. She said that the blood was very filling. Puzzled, the hero decided to try it himself. At first, he thought it tasted like the blood of an ordinary animal. However, the hero immediately felt a surge of power wash over him, and a faint blue aura enveloped his body. Then he realized that the monster was of a high level. Its blood was rich in energy. Michael hoped that this medicine would help revive the unconscious Olivia. Then he brought her some and tried to make her swallow it, but it only spilled from her lips. Ella was desperate, not understanding why Olivia was not swallowing. The girl lay on the bed without moving, which left her friends dumbfounded. Michael was shocked. At one point he thought he had lost his girlfriend. However, then a brilliant solution came to his mind. He drank the monster's blood himself. Then he leaned right over Olivia while Ella closed her eyes in shame. After this, the hero poured blood into her mouth through a kiss, hoping to save her life. Olivia stirred slowly, warmth spreading through her body until she woke up, but her first reaction was to scream. She thanked Michael for saving her, but her whole face was red with embarrassment. However, the hero told her that her scream almost deafened him. He also noted that she was still weak and warned that Olivia still needed rest. Then Ella promised to stand guard so that no danger would come near them. However, Olivia, despite Michael's advice, also offered her help. Michael said that in that case he would take a rest for now, although he thought to himself that this was an excellent opportunity to gain more experience.